Let's start with the COVID inquiry. I mean, there are going to be a number of reports. This is 2 out of 10 reports, which tells you how much there is to go through here. I think one of the things I sort of took from this is that the WhatsApp messages that we use a lot of the time have all been deleted. So you can imagine it's quite hard, I would have thought, to try and get some of the information. But this is pretty damning. You know, for people who've lost loved ones, and Kate, we don't need to remind ourselves, you know, you don't need reminding what you've been through.
No, that's what he caught it. That's what caused the damage.
Yeah, this will be absolutely damning. Bringing it all back for a start. And then this is now on record that an expert has looked at this and said that 23,000 lives could have been saved, Salma. Yet no one really will ever be held accountable, will they?
I think that's the sort of difficulty here, is that it's important to have had the inquiry, even though I don't think we've learnt anything particularly new apart from the detail. The fact is, you know, we all lived through it. We had our views, and certainly when you saw things like Partygate, it was pretty damaging for the government at the time. I think the accountability question is critical because you still have people who are named in the report who serve in government today. So the Chief Scientific Advisor, Lord Vallance, is a minister from the House of Lords and, you know, was also cited in this report as somebody who used behavioural information but didn't have any evidence to talk about it. So, critically, when you think about the lockdowns, they said that, you know, people wouldn't abide by them, and that turned out to be incorrect, but it also turned out that it wasn't based on fact. So I think there are a lot of things that we can learn from it, but, yes, the accountability is going to be different. I would just say this as well, that it only really is going to make a difference if there is proper pandemic planning in the future, if there is some kind of state system that we can trust, because most people, including myself, would have been sat at home during the pandemic. I mean, I'd left government at this point and thought, well, why hasn't there? You would assume that there would be proper pandemic planning. Why wasn't it there?
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it, Karen? When you look at front page of Telegraph, £200 million COVID, I told you so. There's going to be people thinking, what could we have done with that £200 million when we're in, you know, the economy's in such a state and we want the services within the NHS and other areas to be properly funded. However, you know, I guess when you see that in any situation, in any time in history, if 25,000 people have been died needlessly, then there should be an inquiry. I wonder, though, if we can really learn to plan for the next pandemic, because there was pandemic planning done by the government, obviously not good enough, but it was just a different pandemic than they planned for. And is that going to be the problem going forward? That, I guess, viruses and what comes along is never going to be what we plan for? Or should there be a trust in the people in charge to look at all eventualities?
Well, it's difficult because, you know, dealing with emergencies, whether in the form of a virus or whether it's in terms of our defence, a terror attack or a terrible disaster that might happen, all of these issues, floods, for example, are another really good example of how prepared are we for those, which seem to be occurring even more these days. But the first report of the COVID inquiry did look at that preparedness, and they said it was a shambles. And it has been allowed to weaken, I think, over the last 15 years. And one of the recommendations out of that was that for something like this, it shouldn't be just the Department of Health that's dealing with it. You need something better. But in this report, and I know it's costing a lot of money, and I know a lot of people would say, I told you that, watching things on the TV from home, you know, I was thinking, I don't quite understand. You know, this was in February when we knew stuff was happening. We knew from January onwards.
We knew from Italy.
We knew from Italy, exactly. We had people going on skiing, coming back. I was thinking, you know, earlier on it was saying, oh, you know, take a bit of care, but nobody knew. I was actually chairing a conference early on in March and nobody knew what we were meant to be doing. And then a fortnight later, we were in lockdown. So there is a real issue here about lesson learning. Is the other
problem as well, is the other question, not necessarily problem as well, the individual personalities and the dynamic within that particular government. So some of the direct accusations from the floor that it was toxic, the handling was inexcusable, it was chaotic, the loudest voices were the only ones that were heard, and frequently it was women's voices that were softer, that weren't being listened to, that later proved to be right. That seems to say something more and something different about politics generally in a way that we need to address?
I think that that is absolutely true. And if you talk about the pandemic exposing weaknesses in our system, the top weakness that it exposed was that actually the way decisions are made and the way that that's formed and the way that that actually impacts those personalities and those characters. But this was a particularly toxic sort of group of people that existed. And, you know, they'd just come off the sort of success, you know, as they would see it, of Brexit that was done at the end of January. So there's context to this as well that we need to understand about.
It's almost like we elected the people for the wrong time.
Well, they said that at the time, like perhaps what you wanted was more of a Theresa May than a Boris Johnson at that particular moment. But it's not just that it was toxic, it's what happened to the experts. We all said believe in the science, that was the government line, but we also, it turns out, weren't really being told the right stuff around what the evidence base was.
But part of the problem with that, Summer, as well is that what's clear from this report, that it was a very small group of politicians of the government who were involved, and even they were like ferrets in a sack fighting each other. You didn't have really other members of the cabinet involved. You didn't have Parliament involved. And at the time, you know, obviously Keir Starmer's leader said we're going to be constructive in this because we're dealing with a massive emergency on our hands. But again, you know, Labour did say earlier on, maybe we should be taking this serious, have more social distancing earlier in that first part of 2020 instead of leaving it.
But the issue there is that, again, we're making this political because it's not about which person said what or which party said what, because actually we were all completely blindsided.
Yeah, but
if we don't... But this is the thing, again, we're not going to learn from it. We know that it was shambolic in number 10. We also know that it was shambolic in terms of the advice. We also know it was shambolic in terms of preparedness. We also know that there is a massive cost of having a lockdown. We're feeling that today in terms of how much borrowing we had to do. So if we're not going to learn the lessons from this or even set down just a process,
but
even if the pandemic changes...
I don't think it's party political, right? I agree with you. It's not party political to say that within our democracy, when something like this happens, there have to be counter voices to a smaller group of people within the cabinet. I mean, I was absolutely shocked when I read that Matt Hancock didn't know about the Eat Out to Help Out until the day it was announced.
Yeah.
I mean, that was literally just done by Treasury.
That July period where things were lifted and encouraged to be lifted.
But the point is, I mean, you know, the thing about we've got to learn our lessons. I messaged a cousin yesterday when I heard it because I knew that she would be bringing it all back. She lost her husband in COVID. And one of the first things she said to me was, I don't think this inquiry will achieve anything. It won't do anything. And that is the general feeling out there. And, you know, it's the fact that, you know, what is the point of this inquiry? What is going to be... There'll be recommendations. You know, will they be seen through? And why is there no accountability? I mean, if you think about that time in February, I remember having arguments with friends going, oh, we need to do something, don't panic. The government will make the right decision at the right time. Clearly now they didn't. They left it too late. Those are decisions made by individuals. Why isn't there accountability? Why aren't those people holed up in a court? I mean, it's a strong position to take. But
it's not necessarily criminality. This is not about sort of, you know, going to court would suggest that there was some kind of criminal behaviour. But this is something that's deeper than that, which is toxic. Well, it can't be negligence if there isn't a duty or a responsibility.
Right.
It's that they are trying to make decisions with the best information that they have at the time.
OK, but
there is a question about whether you had the best.
Because what people would say is if somebody was the head of a corporation and that they didn't deliver on the first duty of care of a government, which is to keep its people safe, people like you would be saying there would be accountability. So why... I think people don't understand why governments almost hide behind that.
I think for any government, and not just ours, everyone around the world was trying to deal with this.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, in terms of the lessons, I mean, I think clearly some wrong choices were made. The vaccination programme was amazing. We were the first in the world to do that, and I think, some, you know, clearly
Huge
credit for that.
as well,
There were people, you know, maybe there would have been, you know, even more problems that occurred in terms of if we didn't have the lockdowns. I know some people are saying, oh, we shouldn't have had any lockdowns. The truth is we should have had more of a lockdown earlier, and then we could have got ahead of the virus. There has to be learning for this. This is a public record of really looking at all these issues.
Okay.
The other aspect of it, of course, is your point, Sama, about the scientific advice. It was too narrow. There were people who were experts in infection control, but you needed people there who were mental health, who understand children's needs, and particularly in terms of their exclusion from going to a school and learning.
The flip side
and that
of
is
it,
a real learning. So that is something to really think about. But we really need to have a total overhaul of our emergency preparedness for not just this sort of thing, but many other things that we have to
indeed,
deal
you know,
with.
whether it be cyber hacking or any sort of thing. Just to say, Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock both have yet to release any kind of statement about the findings. Dominic Cummings, though, did respond on X saying that the inquiry has been a mix of Inspector Clouseau cover-ups and rewriting history. The lawyers have paid themselves millions and made understanding of what happened even worse. He did come under quite specific criticism, though, Dominic Cummings, didn't he, in terms of adding to that chaotic, toxic thing, so he might well believe that.
Yeah, and we also had comment from the Cabinet Office. They've called the report sobering, adding, "We will consider its findings and recommendations in detail and respond in due course. The government remains committed to learning the lessons needed to protect and prepare us for the future."
And we're going to be speaking to
Liz
Alex
Kendall.
Burkhardt.
Oh, Alex Burkhardt,
well,
yes.
Who was former PPS to Boris Johnson over the show, and indeed also
I know, Liz Kendall
as well from the government,
Should we talk about migration? Yesterday, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, laid out her plans for legal migration, you know, if you want to compare it to what's so-called illegal migration. In a nutshell, she's basically saying that it should be a privilege to get citizenship. So a lot of people now are going to could wait up to 20, 25 years. I had one report this morning saying it could be 30 years, possibly, until you get some kind of citizenship. And if you're a higher taxpayer, you might get one within 3 years. I mean, I can understand some of the logic as to why she's doing it, but if we're trying to address those issues, a lot of people, if you're trying to address issues such as cohesion and making people feel British and British values, this doesn't feel like it's going to do that. Are we potentially heading to a 2-3-tier migrant system where actually lots of migrants who are working in social care, healthcare, hospitality will be looked at as, well, you're not quite with us yet, you're not part of us yet, and they might not feel part of Britain?
I think we've always had a tiered system when it comes to legal migration into the country. There's always been fast tracks for certain groups of workers who can add to our skills or bring the certainty that they're not going to be dependent on public funds. There have always been rules by that. I think what Shabana Mahmood is actually doing, and honestly, I think she is the best Labour voice we've had in decades, talking about tackling this system, because we should have been talking about it in Labour much more strongly a long time ago, and we could have got ahead of the situation we have today, which is a broken migration system, whether it's dealing with illegal migration or legal migration. I think she makes a valid point, which is actually, you know, coming to this country, working here, is clearly an opportunity for people. It helps us as well. But to move on to the next stage, which is actually permanent residence, is something that has to be earned. And I think she's right about that. And to clear up this mess we have at the moment of really visas not being organised in a way that we can have some sort of sensible controls on who comes in and what they're coming to do when they're here is important. But also access to our NHS, access to benefits, all these things. And she's trying to tackle it, I think, in the most clear and lucid way that we've heard from a long time. She sounds to me, both in terms of what she said yesterday on legal migration and on Monday around illegal migration, as someone who's actually really not just doing this as a tactic or to have a slogan. She's really thinking deeply about it. She's made it clear, Adil, that it will not affect anybody at the moment who has got the right to remain here. It's something to go forward on. And I think she clearly has given a lot of thought, but also she's making sense, and she's saying this is about restoring public confidence.
Just on the illegal migration, I've been in Birmingham the last 2 days and spoke to friends there, Asian friends. We have a connection to Shabana Mahmood. She's a MP just down the road. A lot of people know her. I've got family in Small Heath, where she's got family from. Yeah. They're not happy with the connection that she made about being called the effing P word, you know, and relating that to why she has to tackle migration. The feeling is, or what she has effectively done, or at least it looks like, you're saying, well, the only way we stop racists is doing the thing they want us to do. And that's the way it's come across, which is pretty hideous.
Well, I'm sorry if people feel that, because what I heard in the House of Commons when she said that, and she didn't mince her words, let's be honest about it, and that's what I like about her. She's speaking in a really authentic way. She wasn't trying to, I think, say that somehow I'm doing this because this happened. She was responding to a white Member of Parliament, who was somehow saying to her, how dare you do this? How dare you tackle immigration? And because of who you are. And to be honest, I think, you know, she's turning around to this man and saying, white man, and saying, hang on, I actually have been on the receiving this, but she's not doing it just because of that and out of that. She's doing it because she is worried about the social, you know, chaos that we have in our system at the moment, and the lack of
migration because migration is high. Don't tackle migration because the racists are calling
But what she's saying is,
that's exactly what she said. What she said is that my first job is as Home Secretary. This is my responsibility. Migration is too high. We have lost control about where you go and where the rules are for regularised migration. And another member of the House of Commons did something that I think is appalling, which is saying you should basically, by the colour of your skin and your heritage, you should take a certain view.
You should be more liberal.
People say that to me all the time, that why would you be conservative or why would you have a right-wing view because your parents are migrants? My father was an avowed Thatcherite. OK, that should not be a determiner of how you carry out your work or your job.
But as a result,
so I think that is not appropriate and it's not fair to her.
But as a result, when Tommy Robinson congratulates her and says, finally, you know, we're getting somewhere, when Reform are often accused of racism, we'll get onto that in a minute, say that she'd be a member of her party. I mean, there's a feeling from people that they have achieved what they wanted to achieve. Is that a good thing?
But they're running scared now because what she's essentially done is neutralise some of the tactics that they would use to basically say, OK, well, you're not doing enough on migration. She's actually saying, OK, I'm hearing what communities are saying. I'm understanding what's happening in terms of indefinite leave to remain and regularised status. And I'm saying, actually, I am going to make it tougher because some questions are legitimate around pace of change and access to services. And if you want social cohesion, you have to show people that you are trying to do this fairly.
I worry about, you know, if you go to Dubai, for example, and lots of Brits, a lot of people our views will go to Dubai. And the thing that strikes you in Dubai, there are two types of migrants. There are the white Brits who get the golden visas and they've been employed and they're in the bars and they're in the clubs and they're in the hotels. Then you have the other set of migrants who are never going to get the golden visas. They are living in what they call Dubai ghettos in the desert. Some of them are rumoured to be on less than $1 a day. They never feel like they're part of Dubai. You never see them. You never see them in Dubai.
Work there
but is that OK?
Don't get a permanent citizenship.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying... yes.
So it might be that those people are... some people from America, South Africa get better paid. I'm not interrupting you, but I just think... People don't understand that Dubai has a system where you never, ever get citizenship.
And that's the same for a lot of countries like Bahrain and elsewhere. You never get citizenship.
And we're in that kind of scenario, at least for the next 20 years for a migrant. What I'm saying, is that OK? Because what will happen is, I think what may happen, a lot of people think, is that, well, migrants will just come here now and say, well, I'll just get money out of being in Britain for as long as I can, then go back. Is that OK? If they never feel like they want to be British, like having in Dubai.
I think that's a misinterpretation.
Or in Spain, for example.
I think that's a misinterpretation of what this would offer. Because what you're talking about in other places, there isn't any permanent route to citizenship in a lot of those places. And here we have labour market controls, we have labour laws. And she's not saying never, she's saying there has to be a route, a gated route to citizenship in a different way. OK, there are lots of people who will be here who came in seeking asylum and who've never been able to be removed, some people have been here for 30 or 40 years. I mean, I'm not talking about numbers, it's people that I have met through various charitable work. But this is not... I think to suggest that, you know, this is somehow giving succour to racists or this is somehow going to prevent migrants...
I'm not suggesting it. Tommy Robinson has said
I'm arguing the point of what might be out there in the ether about what people are reacting to. And it's like, look, you know, quite often... Caroline and I will agree on certain things. We've both worked in the Home Office. You represented what was described as a red ball seat. That's where I grew up. And I think you have to acknowledge that there is a really tough balancing act to get that public trust back on immigration, but also strike the right balance to remain humane in our
Is it practical at the end, though? You know, if you think about it. Look, you know, this is great to discuss this, but every 2.5 years now, a migrant's going to be assessed. How do you do that? At what point do you assess them? How do you know they don't just get lost in the system anyway?
Hang on, there's a few ways to... If they're legally here, they're legally here.
But won't they just hide in the system?
If they're legally here,
if they're legally here, they can't hide. But also...
Some do.
Illegals hide all the time, and people who overstay their visas
But won't we get more
of
of that, is what I'm asking.
Well, look... the thing is, she is the first Home Secretary in a long time, I think, to really have a really good, hard, practical, I think, common sense look at all of this. And what she's saying is that, you know, there will be evidence. There will be data on people working. There'll be data on whether people are getting benefits. There will be data on if they've committed a crime as well or done something that I think should jeopardise their right to remain in this country. And what really, I think, is awful, and I'm not trying to say you're saying this, Adil, but, you know, the reason Tommy Robinson and Farage have got traction in our country on this issue around immigration is that successive Home Secretaries have failed, and in opposition also the Labour Party has failed for a long time to address this issue. So we've given this vacuum in which these other more extreme voices can be heard. And the truth is that's exactly what Shabana said this week. She said, if we don't do this in a way that is reasonable and fair and does promise people who work hard and pay into the system the opportunity, we will lose out to those other voices. Let's
move on. You mentioned Nigel Farage there. There's some serious allegations about him in the last 2 days in the Guardian newspaper. Going back to his school days at Dulwich College, he's accused of being anti-Semitic. Liz Kendall, we're speaking to later, has said that he needs to speak out publicly and address these issues. These are long-term allegations, but, you know, Reform is often accused of racism, with there's 2 incidents at the moment, both WhatsApp groups. One candidate has been suspended for using a Chinese slur. Another one has been suspended for being a part of a group that called for Islam genocide. Is there a problem in the Reform Party, and does Nigel Farage have questions to answer?
Well, I think people should be explain themselves, and I think in situations like this, I don't know what, I can't remember what, he was secondary school, wasn't it? I think
Dulwich College, Dulwich College. So he's not a young boy.
No, I appreciate that. I think, you know, when these things come out, and I think it involved bullying as well, alongside, so it was, again, another toxic atmosphere.
We can't repeat them, but he was singing some terrible anti-Semitic songs, apparently, allegedly. He denies them.
So I think there is an onus on people publicly who could, you know, are representing constituencies who could represent a bigger group of people down the road in terms of elections, to both hold themselves to account and really demonstrate that, you know, own what they did, because I don't think you can run away from that, and and actually say something to convince everybody that somehow they have changed or their views or what have you. There have been plenty of politicians who have said things in private as well as not so private, and then come out with the sorry card and that's it. But I think, you know, to be in public office, there's more than that's needed in terms of public accountability and assurance that the sort of person who would do that at that time is not going to do that behind the scenes today or even publicly today.
Quick statement from Reform on this subject matter. If things like this happened a very, very long time ago, you can't necessarily recollect what happened. But we'll talk more about that in the programme. We all know that the weight loss jabs have transformed the lives of many people and just transformed the way we think about tackling weight culturally, even if people, you know, it's been a phenomenon. A weight loss once-a-day pill, it's been said, could offer more access to weight loss medication. Experts are saying that the new study has confirmed that the tablet can help people shed up to 1/10 of their body weight. I know you have a lot of dealings with the hospitals and boards, everything. This looks like it could be a cheaper and more accessible way for people to take advantage of what others have experienced on the jab.
I have always been very against the jab.
Have you?
Not because I don't think it's important to offer people that weight loss treatment, but I worry that you end up in a situation where you're so dependent on it that there aren't any lifestyle changes that come. So, you know, healthy eating, exercise, and that is all tied to mental health as well. So I do worry that we are sort of...
Popping a pill to solve everything.
to solve everything. So that would be my start, but I do think that, having talked to people who've been on it and sort of the psychological element of it, I understand why it would be helpful. If that is a safer way of distributing this kind of medication, then I think it would be helpful to have it, but it has to be controlled.
But you speak to medics and they say, look, we are under strain here at the NHS. You know, so actually people are coming in with long-term issues because of their diet, can be linked to their diet. So this is a really good solution for that.
I think, you know, whether it's the jabs or in tablet form, they offer some really helpful answers, one part of the answers, to people's difficulties with not only weight control, but also the associated conditions of diabetes and other things that come with it. I'm not against necessarily the jabs or these tablets. What I worry about is if we don't have a managed process through the NHS or other professional health bodies that know what they're doing, people just go online and they end up with possibly something in the tablet form or an injection that isn't what they should be taking, but also the managing of it as well. I was on here with Nadine, I think earlier this year, and she was on the jabs and talking about it and how it helped her.
Nadine Dorries.
Nadine Dorries. Sorry, Nadine Dorries, I should say.
One name now. It's like Madonna.
She's got an album out next week.
Don't say that. She'll be dining out on that. Don't say that, for God's sake. But since then, I've seen her write articles about the side effects of it.
Right.
You know, so we have to be really mindful of all of this.
OK, thank you very much.
And
Caroline
coming back later.
I thought you were
Caroline and
gonna
one
ask us if we're on
named
the
Salma.
Yeah.
Salma's got a feel about it.
Yeah, just the one.
I've got a song, Sweet Caroline.
You're right.
It's sung on many occasions, apparently.
And they're always just for you, not for anything else.